As mentioned previously, Grete was born in Switzerland, and her diary manuscript tells of how she moved to Copenhagen, Denmark to live with her aunt and uncle. As the diary manuscript further describes, Grete traveled on the train from Copenhagen to Neuburg, Germany. This is a distance of 965 km, or 587 miles, and takes over 11 hours to make the trip. This map shows the location Neuburg, Germany, which Grete refers to as the setting for most of the writings within this diary manuscript.
Chapter 1: My Family and My Journey. Up to the time I was 9 years old, I was only interested in things that happened to me either on trains, boats, in hotels, or in my father's studio. Although my real name is Grete, I was also called Signorina Rita, Mademoiselle Marguerite, or Fräulein Gretchen. It depended where my family was located or the nurse in whose care I was given. My sister, a year younger than I, was more lucky because governess from my country tried to change her name. Even Marietta, who baptized me Fräulein Gretchen, did not think that Fräulein Klarchen sounded as well as Clara. Marietta, who was our German nurse when we lived in Lucerne, was with me on the day I saw my mother for the last time. Some peasants had found my mother lying on a rock about 100 meters below the summit of the Rigi, where she had fallen by accident. I was very young when she died, but I still remember a song she had taught me. My father has painted a picture of a lovely fairy, and he says that my mother looked just like her. My father was away a great deal and we had to stay with Marietta, until one day, my aunt from Copenhagen came and took us with her. In Copenhagen, we lived in a beautiful house and from my window I could see over our garden wall, the old green roofs and towers of the city. My aunt was very kind, and uncle was always friendly. He, like my father, wore a white smock, but father's was usually spattered with paint, while uncle's had a strong odor of antiseptic. Our governess, Victoria, was tall and stout and she must have been 100 years old, not because of her gray hair, but because she knew absolutely everything. Being cross-eyed, we could never tell when she was looking at us, and this was one of her greatest advantages. After spending 3 happy years in Copenhagen, my aunt told me one day that she had received a letter from my father in which he explained his wish to have me sent to a school in southern Germany. Marietta had recommended to him an institution for young girls. Not very far from Munich, he wrote, he had found a most enchanting city with ancient gateways and towers and a fine old castle, which stands proudly on a huge rock. The king had given a portion of it to the English sisters, who had organized a private school for girls. Below this castle is the quaint little town of Neuburg. The Danube flows by and it is surrounded by green hills and lovely forests. Here lived the Hoffmann family. Herr Hoffmann was a wealthy manufacturer and because of his importance in the city hall, he was made honor citizen of Neuburg. Fran Hoffmann, a distant relative of Marietta, and her 2 sons and 2 daughters could not have been more lovable. This family had consented to offer me their home during the time I would attend school in Neuburg, and in return, the Hoffmann sons would live with my aunt and uncle while they were studying at the University of Copenhagen. It was decided to accept this wonderful opportunity, which offered me an education in a foreign land. During the last weeks of my stay in Copenhagen, there was little else thought of or discussed than my departure. It was a hot summer day when we stood at the station at Warnemund where my aunt and Victoria had brought me. Don't talk to anybody. Don't accept any candy. They repeated over and over again. Stay in the train until that nice man with the shiny buttons tells you that you are in Berlin. There, I was told, a nice lady would meet me and she would put me on another train and give me instructions from there on. Victoria gave me a picture saying, the lady in Berlin looks just like that. I was made to look at this picture so often that I really thought I knew her. I was also given a large basket with sandwiches and a big box of candy. Don't talk to anybody, I heard again. No candy. You are a big, grown girl now, already 9 years old, big enough to take care of yourself. If my aunt thought, God bless you, little girl, or if Victoria cried when the train pulled out of the station, I didn't know it. However, I do remember the peculiar feeling which almost seemed to choke me. I had no idea where either Berlin or Munich were, I only knew that somewhere Marietta was waiting for me, and with the happy thought of seeing her again I started my long journey alone. It was not difficult to follow my aunt's and Victoria's advice, for not knowing a word of German how could I talk with anyone? However, I must confess that I tried once to approach a friendly-looking lady. She was traveling with a little dog, and after watching her for some time, I could not resist the temptation to ask her the name of her pet. I did not get further than giving her a smile when she took me by the hand, guided me to the end of the car, and opened the door marked Damon. After patting me gently, she smiled and left. How I was embarrassed. Aunt and Victoria were right, I certainly would not again attempt another conversation. Disgusted with my experience and afraid to smile at anyone else, I sat for hours in that rumbling train and looked only out the window. It soon became tiresome to see the green fields flying by and the telephone wire along the tracks going up and down, up and down. There were beautiful castles in the distance, and the train passed through quaint small villages with red-roofed houses surrounded by neat little gardens and barefooted children standing at the fence waving to me. We stopped only at large stations, and then, but for a short time. It was night and we had not yet reached Berlin. Along the road, bright lights flickered behind drawn curtains and shuttered windows. The gentleman across from me, his mouth wide open, his head heavy on one side, was entertaining the entire compartment with his lusty snoring. Now was the time when everyone longed to be home, but I was not homesick, being too much afraid to miss Berlin, which I thought we never would reach. Of course, we finally arrived in Berlin, and the nice lady whom Victoria had told me about was at the station to meet me. She looked very imposing in her nurse's uniform, and she had a white band with a red cross around her arm. She also had a picture of me in her hand, but best of all she talked Danish. What a relief! I did not have much to say, merely yes and no, but had I known that this was my last opportunity to use my native language, I certainly would have been more talkative. The lady took me to the children's home, and all that I was interested in was a bed. If it was hard or soft, I did not care as long as it didn't move. The rumbling and rolling of the train all day persisted to echo in my weary head. It seemed to me but a short time that I had been asleep when I was awakened by the lady who insisted upon dressing me. I resented the thought of being treated like a child, being washed behind the ears, and she would not even let me put my stockings on. I thought that I had proved by traveling alone that I was really grown up and capable of taking care of myself like Aunt and Victoria expected me to. Humiliated and angry, I developed, right then, a stubborn dislike for this nice lady. No one had to tell me to hurry with breakfast, as I was too anxious to be on my way to Marietta. Again, I was given a basket of food, again a man with shiny buttons was pointed out to me, and again I was on a train. On this train, however, I was not as timid as I had been on the previous day. Wandering around as if I were in our drawing room at home, I tried to make friends with some children. They, however, only laughed at me and running to their mothers said something which I did not understand. Looking out of the window became very tiresome, and in searching for other distractions I discovered the iron bars of the luggage racks, and they suggested gymnastics. So, I passed some time swinging on them and turning somersaults. Other children must have thought that my idea was good, for wherever there was an iron bar one of the youngsters was dangling and acting like a monkey. My lunch basket helped me for a while to pass a few delightful moments. It was so much larger than the one I had received from Copenhagen, and it had different food than I had ever seen before. Once in a while I started to sing all the songs Victoria had taught me. Everybody around stared at me and listened, but ignoring them I thought the train made so much noise that a little more disturbance would not make any difference. When it became night again and the train still kept on rolling, I fell asleep. The next thing I knew was Marietta leaning over me, and then I was sure that I was in Munich. Oh, I was happy to see her. Outside on the station platform, she pointed to a little stout woman with shiny red cheeks. "This is your mother," she said. "Your German mama," she hurriedly explained after realizing I didn't know what she meant. This strange woman greeted me by throwing her arms lovingly around my neck. A large brooch, with an angel painted on it, was scratching my ear and her tears were wetting my face. What she was crying about I could not quite understand, and I, too, would have started to cry if it had not been for my next introduction to Maria, her oldest daughter. Maria stooped low to greet me and her two heavy black braids almost touched the ground. "Here," said Marietta, "is your German father." But he was tall, and it seemed to me that he would surely fall over if he kept throwing his shoulders backward. He had a large silver watch chain and several medals, a gold horseshoe and a four-leaf clover dangling from it. I felt myself lifted up to a gentle face with smiling eyes, and when he kissed me on my forehead his beard was tickling my nose. He surely must have said something very important, because his voice sounded so solemn. Marietta explained to me that I was to go with my new papa and mama and that she could not go with me because she was staying in Munich where she was a nurse for another little girl. I was lifted into a carriage and placed between Mama and Maria. Papa, perched in front on a high leather cushion, drove the two fat horses along a dark and bumpy road which seemed to be endless. I was so sleepy when we finally reached my new home that I was almost too tired to climb the stairs. All the excitement that met me upon entering the house brought me soon to life again. Maria, holding me by the hand, was shouting loudly and I heard her saying my name over and over again. It didn't take me long to note that the tall young man with the blonde mustache was her brother, Franz, and the boy with the short leather pants and fancy suspenders was Felix. Her sister, Feeny, was the little fat girl just a trifle taller than I, and the with the white apron was Fanny, the maid.